Hi, welcome to my Articulate 360 application, How to Become an Effective Teaching Assistant. I made this resource specifically for those who would be starting out leading their own labs and lectures as teaching assistants for university professors. You'll notice that I've put a special note to the University of Washington Center for Teaching and Learning and Stanford Teaching Commons. They have awesome resources for professional development that I leveraged with this uh, Articulate Rise application. Let's get started. In the introduction, I start out with asking students, what are the common problems teaching assistants face in the classroom? And so I go over in the introduction reasons why teaching and understanding how to teach are extremely important, especially when leading your first lecture or lab. As a teaching assistant, there's not too much pressure or information provided in regards to how to actually run a classroom. And so, those who are really nervous about starting their first couple of days as a teaching assistant will really value this resource. The three common problems that this Articulate Rise application will focus on are the three below: individual learning challenges in a classroom of 25 plus students, lack of effective online and in-person communication, as well as classroom management. And you'll notice this is an accordion, so there are quite a few paragraphs and images that will really highlight the three common problems. After reading the introduction and getting a better sense of what is a part of these problems, learners will then be asked to think about the fact that there is no one size fits all solution to these three problems. There will always be multiple approaches, just as there are with learning theory. There will always be multiple approaches to these three problems. And each year will be different. You'll have different sets of students with different learning needs. You'll have different educational technology that will help support your learners that you'll need to leverage. But there are ways that we can help support ourselves in our preparation for the year to better handle the challenges that may arise. So I start the introduction with this information, and I end the introduction with an assessment of 3 questions. And I'm going to let you all know they're all true is their answers. But I did set the responses to be at an 80% pass rate. And this is because I put some really helpful information after answering the question correctly to give a little bit more understanding of why I'm providing these questions. So I'll give this as an example. True or false, students can recall only 40% to 46%, of the content presented to them by lecture. And so this is correct. If students remember less than half of the content you've prepared, you'll need to support their learning with different learning modalities. So, for example, you might want to do more of a kinesthetic approach instead of more of a presentation viewing style approach. And then you'll see the citations I've provided. I was really intentional with providing citations for each of the resources that I use, as well as the statistics. I feel like it's super important, especially in learning programs, to make sure that the materials that you're providing are accurate and are based in research. So here's another one, last one. True or false, in a study completed by Professor Stephen Porter at North Carolina State University, he found students who attend college with high-quality students will have higher behavior and academic performance than those attending college with lower quality students. This is true. And Porter found that these students at highly selective colleges do spend more time studying because they're surrounded by other peers who are also devoting their time to studying. He reported, quote, "Students' outcomes do differ if a student attends Harvard rather than a school with open admissions, and the difference is due to factors other than differences in resources. Peers exert an effect on college students, and we can see that attending school with high ability students will affect how engaged a student is." So after getting all of the answers correct, we got 100%. And again, you'll see that the pass rate I set was 80%. I wanted students to get 100% on this assignment because each of the problems connects to these statistics, and we look to these problems to understand what are going to be the main issues that a learner is going to face as they become these teacher assistants. So this first problem, individual learning challenges in a classroom of 25 plus students. The major question or objective of this section is, what strategies can you use to support your students and their learning needs? You may have a lecture hall with 150 students. You may have a lecture hall of only 20 students, or even some smaller class sizes of only 5 students, depending on the undergraduate course. So it's important to recognize that each of these students, regardless of the size of the classroom, is going to have learning needs. You'll see a little graphic I set up to kind of start thinking about why it's important to create individualized learning opportunities for your students. And before we look at the strategies, I ask the learners to reflect on their own experiences, just to understand why it's important for creating new information or new knowledge building from their own prior experiences. So I asked the students, what did the teacher, teacher's assistant, or professor do to support your learning in the past? Did you notice any students who were ignored or left behind in your classes? Did you feel comfortable answering questions or asking questions about class content? And then were the assessments provided demonstrative of learning objectives provided by the professor in their syllabus and course lectures? So in this carousel material, I then go through differentiated classroom instruction opportunities, interactive lecture, for example, and you'll see there's a couple of opportunities underneath here. I recognize that this is quite a bit of text, but I also want the learners to be able to reflect back on this material and have it all solidly in one place, so they don't have to pull out a bunch of tabs to find this information. And then after looking at some of these differentiated learning strategies, we then jump to the next problem, which is lack of effective online and in-person communication. I start this section off with kind of a funny activity of flashcards where I ask the learners to flip some of the slang terms that are common for undergraduate students in 2022. And this is just a means of recognizing that language is extremely important in the classroom, and sometimes you will not know the slang that a student may be using as a teaching assistant. So just recognizing that it's important to keep open lines of communication, and you can use a variety of resources to be able to do that. I also provide following resources to support how to reach out to students as a teacher's assistant, and that when and in what regard to send this information. So is it better in an email? Is it better on a Google Classroom setting? Is it better on Moodle? And then there's an extra resource here. A part of communication that's extremely important via my past experience has been making sure you set guidelines and expectations for when assignments and projects are due, and that it feels manageable to your learners as a teacher's assistant. So this resource is coming from Stanford, and it actually provides information on how to give benchmark notifications to support the planning of your assessments and to help support your students with understanding how they too can plan out their assessments. Just staying organized, super important in the classroom. The next and final problem that teachers of all types face, professors, instructors of learning, is these classroom management problems. And so this first activity to start off our understanding of the problem and finding solutions for it comes from this checklist. You'll see some of these you may also have experienced as a learner. Again, this is a constructivist mindset, in where I'm asking you to think about your prior experiences to better understand what we need to learn and what strategies we can put on our toolboxes to prevent classroom management issues from occurring again. And so how do you avoid the above consequences in your classroom? We need these management strategies. And so in this embedded image, you'll see that there are little icons that you can click on to find some information on how to organize your class to make sure that your class has a management style that's connected to the culture of your school, the culture of your students. So we look at teacher-centered versus student-centered. Disciplining adult learners looks extremely different than disciplining younger learners, K through 12 learners. And then we also are giving materials on universal design for learning. So just guiding how you can make sure your class is engaging, and that students feel comfortable participating in your class. Most of the time, management problems come from being bored in your class or not feeling like the material meets their learning needs. Below the embedded image, you'll see a scenario. And this scenario follows John as he is dealing with a couple of issues with one of his students. These resources that you've looked at above will definitely help with solving the scenario. And so in order to help John, we meet one of his students and we figure out how to approach what this student needs. So I clicked the wrong one, and the response will always give us a little bit more information so we can make the correct response a second time again. So instead of yelling at the student in front of the classroom for being tardy, I'm going to instead choose to forgive the student the first time, but document the continued tardiness and let the professor of the course know. And so this continues. And then I provide a additional opportunity for the adult learner to understand how to be a teacher's assistant by creating discussion questions for this learner to have in real time, to always make sure that their learning is going to be based in real opportunity, and so that the learning is not just like left on this articulate rise. And finally, we get to our quiz. And this is a check for understanding where you are dragging each of the statements to true or false. So feedback can be provided in person and online via teaching management software. And this is true. Email is the worst form of correspondence. This would be false. Your students will always have the same learning needs. This is false. Making rules as issues come up is a great classroom management strategy. False. So I'm hoping you're noticing as this quiz is going, I'm taking the information from all three of these problems, and this becomes a summative assessment. Adult learners need to know the course objectives to learn. And we got 100%. Again, the threshold on here was not set. It was just to make sure that you were able to take all the information that you learned from the first three problems and apply it. And then I leave the learner with these key takeaways. It's important to synthesize your information into bite-sized pieces, small pieces, so that they're able to take away just the bare bones. If they forget anything else, they will remember that they need to teach all their learners and be aware of all individual learning needs, that they need to know how to effectively communicate both online and in person, and that they'll know how to keep their students engaged and participating in class to prevent poor management or poor classroom problems and thus poor classroom management. And at the end, they get a little celebratory thank you for completing this course and good luck with your academic year. So that is my Articulate Rise, how to become an effective teaching assistant. Thanks so much.